I wait until I see it. If I don't see it, it's not real. If I don't see it, I am like the doubting Thomas of the internet, I guess. I am the doubting Thomas of the internet. There I am. I see me, and it is good. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. If you're in my time zone, it's still morning. This is my morning show. Welcome to my morning show. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron. I am Ron Placone. I hope everyone has had a wonderful weekend. I hope everyone is staying safe. I hope everyone is staying well. Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Our friends over at ZT.com, their tea, it kind of rules. I have been having some amazing teas from them. I had the Vigilante, Graham Elwood's tea. I had some of that. It's phenomenal. The white peach Chinese tea, phenomenal. The raspberry pecan, been my favorite for a long time. You can get their tea wholesale because of the pandemic. Go over to ZT.com. Makes an amazing holiday gift. That's CHITEA.com. Also, our friends over at triageoil.com, excuse me, sorry. Somebody's got a case of the Mondays. TRIAGE oil.com. They make pain oil you put on your body. I use it all the freaking time. I pulled, I don't know what I did exactly, but I hurt my heel. It's very weird. I don't exactly know how, but my heel was kind of like goofy, which is actually quite painful. When your heel's messed up, it's not pleasant. And I don't know what I did to it, but for a while, my heel was just bad. And this oil helped. And I use it on my neck regularly. It's amazing pain oil. Use cannabis-infused pain oil. Get some. Triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. Trendy Nay has been educating people for a long time on cannabis. Check out his show, and they do make an amazing product. And thank you so much for the care packages here to Get Your News On with Ron. I appreciate it very much. So, folks, I'm excited. This is we are about to really kick into election season pretty hardcore. I got some grassroots local candidates coming up later this week. So today for Music Monday, well, I wanted to not have a candidate on and have a musician on. And so I'm going to have on a buddy of mine who is a phenomenal bass player. He has a podcast called the Lowdown Society podcast, which it's a podcast about bass playing. It's about bassists, which if you want a podcast about guitars, there's probably 1,000,005 of them, I'd imagine. Podcasts about bass, he might be the only one, to tell you the truth. He's the dude. He's the bass dude. And here's the deal. He also is a Swedish citizen, and he has been in both Sweden and in the United States during this pandemic. Now, a quick disclaimer here. I want to talk to him about his experiences. I want to talk to him about what that was like. We know that Sweden has taken a different approach than a lot of other places in the world. And quite frankly, so has the United States, really. The United States has taken the different approach. Their different approach has been, hey, screw everybody. We don't give a shit. That's been their approach. So I'm curious to talk to him about his experiences. I have no agenda. I believe in science. I believe in medicine. I'm a lefty. You guys know all this, and so is he. So I have no agenda here. I'm just curious to talk to him about what his experiences were like. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Victor Broden. What's up, Victor?
Hey, Ron.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you as well. I'm trying to figure out if I've seen you in the flesh since your wedding, and I don't think I have. So this is glorious.
Yeah, I know, man. It's well, I've seen you. I mean, I've quote seen you, like you and Anthony, who Anthony's done this show as well, your songwriting partner. I saw some of the Instagram lives you guys were doing when you guys did those.
Those just felt violently self-indulgent, but
I enjoyed it.
I think, you're a music nerd and a music fan. And sometimes if you're having a slow day, just talking about music and your favorite records and what got you started in the first place, it really helps reignite the old flame when you've seen enough of your couch and your four walls. So we were just really hoping to make people nerdy and happy rather than promote anything, really.
No, I feel you, man. I mean, there's been a couple times throughout this thing where I've just kind of turned on my Instagram live and just started strumming some of my favorite songs. and just
Yeah.
like, telling stories, just playing songs, and then just raising money for some kind of cause, like just saying like, hey, if you want to give me a couple bucks, I'm going to be donating it all to, and I've given it to like Bell funds and digital rights organizations and organizations helping out the homeless here in Los Angeles and stuff like that. Just like, hey, I'm just playing some of my favorite songs, having fun, talking music. And if you're having a good time and want to donate something to a good cause, feel free. If you're strapped for cash, just have a good time. And yeah, I've done that a few times, and usually on Mondays because it's like, well, Music Monday. But
yeah,
fun times, right?
Yeah, that's good.
So let's talk some about your experiences, and then let's talk some about you. And then I have a few news stories for you.
Oh,
So
yes.
you're a Swedish. Are you still a Swedish citizen? Is that?
Yes, I am.
Uh-huh. And
I
are you a US citizen as well?
Yes, I am as well.
Okay, you're a dual guy.
I'm a dual guy, and I'm truly a dual guy because I'm 47, and I've done the math, and I've spent about exactly half of my life in Sweden and half in America. I'm lucky enough to have two countries, but I also feel like a man with no country. If you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I can relate. I
Yeah,
mean, I got one of them, and I really feel
yeah,
that way. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm with you. So to give people a little bit of your backstory, so you came to the United States to be a musician, which of course you have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, a lot of young kids dream of being in a big band, but I figured out pretty early that I wanted to be, the side man or the hired gun, or, the kind of guy that, one day you go to a gig and it's hard rock, the next day you're playing bossa nova. I just like playing bass guitar, and the more styles and with the more people I can do it, the better. So that was sort of my childhood dream after the initial sort of I want to be in a band phase. So to do that, you should probably go to school and all that. So I came to Minneapolis, Minnesota when I was 21 to go to school for music. And I picked that because it was a lot safer than a lot of other American big cities. And at the time, I was really like, oh, screw Sweden. I want to not speak Swedish to anyone. And all the other big music schools in the States had a lot of Swedish students. So that's how I ended up in Minnesota for my
But you
first.
must have liked Sweden a little bit because you were like, I don't want to be too away from what I know, so I better pick a place that's really fucking cold.
Well, there was that, and also Minnesota is pretty much built by Swedes and Norwegians. It's half the people in Minneapolis are still called Anderson or Svensson, or all Swedish last names. So I had no clue when I moved there. I was ignorant to how historically the thing is pretty much Swedish. So it was definitely a great way to, when you come alone as a 21-year-old kid from a different country, to move to a big city in America, which is sort of scary, but still feel like there's a little piece of home floating around culturally. So, that was pretty cool, actually. It was
Where'd you go to school?
It was a good break-in period to the American experience. I think if I would have moved to the South right away, or maybe even to New York City, straight from my little hometown in Sweden, even I, who's very open-minded and kind of adventurous on a good day, would have probably been shocked.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you go to school?
A school called Music Tech of Minneapolis. It later became McNally Smith College of Music, and then I continued from there to the University of Miami in Florida, music also. So, yeah.
So what drew you to the bass? Like, because I know, I mean, I have like a lot of bass playing friends. You're one of them, and it's one of those things you overlook just how the bass really dictates the genre that you're playing. Like a bass player can just change a genre at will if they really want to, and if they're a solid bass player who's actually being a bass player and not just playing the notes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing in a metal band and all of a sudden you start playing a disco bass line, the whole band's gonna just sound like Satan disco.
Have you done this before? Did they kick you out of Sweden because you did that? Were you like, because I know death metal was a big deal out there, and did you start doing a disco bass line and they were like, Victor, you either leave the country or we're gonna eat you? Have you read about what we do here? Sometimes we just eat frickin' people. We're gonna eat you if you don't go.
Yeah, no, I really do. I joke a lot that they did throw me out of the country because I smile too much and I talk way too much. And it was really nice because in Sweden, everyone always thought I was drunk because I was so talkative and outgoing. And then I got to America and I was the quiet, weird one. So that was a nice transition, you know.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
all right, so let's fast forward. So you have been in Sweden since the pandemic. Um, and I'd imagine you were going to see family or just
Yeah, yeah, ever since I've been here, whenever I go home, it's 10 days to 2 weeks, and it's never in the summer because a lot of times there's a lot of work in the summer for me, freelance musician dude. So obviously, flight prices being way down, um, and summer in Sweden, and me being able to actually stay for 3 weeks, almost a month. And when when you're from somewhere, and I'm sure you feel this when you go back to Pittsburgh, it you feel like you don't really have time. You show up at a friend's house and you have like some coffee or a beer, and you play with their new kid that you haven't seen before, and then you sort of roll out. And
Mhm.
and so going to Sweden for almost a month was something I haven't done in 20 years. So I was just trying to go, well, is there any silver lining to this pandemic? And if there is, I'm gonna do it, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I would not have been able to stay home for a month if there wasn't a pandemic.
Yeah, well, we had a similar experience, my wife and I, because she's from the Cape Cod area. Like she
Uh-huh.
grew up in a place called Wellfleet, Massachusetts, and so she, as long as she's lived away from there, she has never been able to go home in the summer because for people that live there, your life kind of revolves around tourist season. So whenever the tourists are there, her sisters are typically working about 60 hours a week. Her one sister Airbnbs her place, and that's a big part of how she makes a living because she has this floor that she just Airbnbs out.
Hmm.
But this year, they couldn't do that because tourists weren't coming. The only people in Cape Cod were the people who already had homes there, and they were just kind of staying there and just living there. So, for the first time in as long as she's lived away, she was able to get up there for the summer. And we were able to just go up there and just help her family out with some housing projects, like just some stuff they wanted to do on the house because they couldn't have tourists there. So they had this space available, so we were just able to get up there for a while. And it was, it was the one kind of like, well, this is like a place where you can actually feel like you're helping out and spending some time with family and getting to do something that makes you think, well, if it wasn't for this pandemic, I wouldn't be able to do this. So I guess this is, a micro way to make lemonade out of lemons, to say.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
So,
that's I yeah, that's so it was a no-brainer to do it, really. I mean, and I'm certainly respect science and respect COVID and all that, but I had been on a few domestic flights earlier during the pandemic, and I was very impressed with at least the airplanes I was on. This is a personal experience. I know that
okay.
the internet's filled with with pictures of airplanes being completely full, but all the airplanes I had been on before I went to Sweden, they were on Southwest Airlines. I'm not sponsored by them, but I was super impressed. They only sold like a third of the airplane, and it smelled like, a restaurant in the morning right after 15 people throw up. It just smelled of really strong chemicals, and in I was really impressed by that. So I'm like, yeah, if international flying is anything like my flights from Southwest, I'm going to do this. So I flew Air France from LA to.
All right, you're breaking up a little bit on
There
us.
we
We
go.
lost you for a second.
I think we're back.
Yeah, I think we're
I
back. You were getting a
I
little spotty for a second, then you
yeah
dropped.
yeah. I flew Air France from LA to Paris, and everyone had their own row. And
Okay.
a row on those planes are 4 seats. So so that's I flew over there, and I felt very safe as far as the hygiene slash cleanliness factor. And of course it can't be perfect, but it was good. you know
So what was Sweden like? Sweden has taken a different approach, and there's a lot of different takes out there as to why that was and how that was exactly. But what was your experience? Like what's your just overall take on the whole thing?
Well, I live in LA, as do you,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I'm one of those people that, I have some friends that are very offended by how much life is different in LA. But, I have sort of learned how to work out at home instead of going to the gym. And I don't mind eating at my favorite restaurants, but on a patio instead of inside a room. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my freedoms are being taken away because I don't work out in the gym or I eat in a patio instead of inside a room. So I'm very much not in agreement or have any tolerance for people who complain about those things.
Mm-hmm.
But in spite of that, again, my very personal opinion, in spite of that, coming to Sweden was almost like stepping out of the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
because there was social distancing, but there was no masks.
So some
Um,
people say that in Sweden, people just would always naturally socially distance. It was kind of a cultural thing. Is that true? Like, is there some
yes,
truth to that? That is true. Okay.
yes. Uh, Northern Europeans are the opposite of Southern Europeans, like Italian or Spanish people that greet each other with the kisses on the cheek and all that. Of course, we Swedes shake hands and we sometimes do a quick hug, but there are all these funny memes floating around, like pictures of Swedish bus stops where people are like super far apart and Swedish elevators. And it is true, we are the originators of social distancing because we are quiet and awkward, not unfriendly, just completely quiet and awkward. So you do have a point. Going to Sweden, unless you're in in Stockholm in the big city and you're in like a department store, but most times in Sweden, people aren't up in each other's personal space much, anyways. So the whole 6 foot thing, which is a thing there too, social distancing, I don't think is as tricky for Swedes. Um,
Mm.
Again, I theorize, personal opinions galore here,
Of course, absolutely.
uh,
Just one perspective, one experience.
yes, but yeah, coming from LA, where I put on a mask, which again I don't care. It's a little piece of fabric. I care nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an inconvenience for me at all. I don't wear it when I go running at night. That's it. But except for that, I wear it every day, all the time in LA because I have to.
Me
And I
too.
was in and I was in Sweden for 3.5 weeks. I didn't see one. There isn't one, and the
Like
gas
nobody?
nobody.
Okay,
And the
because I know they said like some people just choose to wear them, but
yes,
for the
no,
most part, people don't.
nobody. And the first time I put on the mask again was I was on the train from my hometown in southern Sweden to the closest international airport, which is Copenhagen, Denmark. And that train is like 2.5 hours to the border, and then the last 20 minutes from the border to the airport, you wear a mask because you're in Denmark. And Denmark at the time had different rules. Uh, Now, worth mentioning is, and I just looked at some numbers before you and I hopped online, is Sweden's COVID numbers during the time I was there, not just deaths, but cases, it was basically squelched. It was pretty much gone when I was there. So it wasn't like people irresponsibly weren't wearing masks. It was basically not around, while here in LA, it's very much around, it's
Right.
everywhere. Um, but they had in the last week and a half in Sweden a severe uptick in cases,
Yes, they did.
a second wave. But I looked at the death numbers, and the death numbers are still pretty much non-existent. Now, if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone talked about Sweden, you look at the surrounding Scandinavian countries. Now they have a little bit less population, but you look at Finland and Denmark and Norway, who shut down much harder than Sweden, and they basically squelched Corona before. It worked because the countries are small. Now Sweden didn't, and we had a lot of deaths. And I'm not defending the way Sweden handled it. This is just me looking at numbers again, theorizing. But what happened in Sweden early on in this pandemic is it got in the old folks' homes. And Sweden to this day have, I think, 5,900 deaths, the whole country, right?
Hmm.
And 5,000 of those had already happened in the middle of July. You know, I looked between May and the end of, or actually between April and June, those first 2.5 months is basically when Sweden had all their deaths. And it got in old folks' homes, and Sweden, who pride themselves in great, of course, government funded care for the elderly, that is a big blemish on our reputation. The fact that our great elderly care let it get into the old folks' home and just run free. So
Hmm.
that, uh, from what I can see, the way my birth country, not my home country, but the way my birth country handled it, the biggest mistake wasn't so much out in everyday life is they let a lot of old people die in institutions that could have been protected better. So that's what I can gather. But my experience being there, I was there when there was no deaths, barely any cases, and Swedish summer, which is a glorious thing, was in full swing, and it stays light out all night. And
How warm does it get
you
up
know,
there?
uh, well, it got really warm the few weeks right before I got there. I got there at the end of summer in late August. Uh, but it gets nothing like the valley here in LA.
Sure.
A nice, very hot Swedish summer day, like when they complain that they are about to die, is maybe 84, 85. But
Really?
yeah,
That's awesome.
but the standard sort of Swedish summer is like, I don't know, the weather today in LA is very much like a chilly Swedish summer day, like 68, 69 for a high, and then chilly at night, better wear a coat kind of a thing.
See, I actually love this right now because I mean, for the first time in weeks, I saw freaking clouds and it felt like fall. And I'm like, because that's the one thing. I mean, you're kind of familiar with where both Anthony and I grew up, Western Pennsylvania, which is a really like Appalachian type place. You get like an autumn, and that's the one thing I really do miss. I don't miss winter. I'm not a winter guy. I'd be happy if I never saw another snowflake in my life,
Yeah.
but like the leaves changing colors and
Yeah.
like the brisk fall weather, that's something that actually, oddly enough, I found this out recently. If you go to like certain elevations in Southern California, you can get it. It does exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I got to go to some of
Absolutely.
these
Yeah.
places. I've never been to them. I got to try to go to them like within the next month or so. But it does exist here. You can get it. You just have to drive to it.
Yeah, and that's the same way with me. I grew up in southern Sweden, so I didn't grow up with winters even like you have in Pittsburgh. I grew up with
Oh
milder
wow.
winters than that, but the winters are darker. They have way more rain and way more of that wet, depressing cold. So I certainly don't miss winters at all. My Viking blood is thinned out. I complain like crazy. Like I woke up this morning at like 9 a.m. and it was cold in my apartment, I thought, and I was like, this is unacceptable. And and yeah, but growing up in like where you come from or where I come from, I think fall and spring, those two things are what you really miss.
Do you ever does your family ever give you shit when you're all like, oh, like do they ever like, you grew up here? Like does
Oh
that
yeah,
ever
oh yeah. This summer when I was home in the middle of the day, I wore a turtleneck and a denim coat the whole time, denim jacket.
Dude, my parents still give me shit like whenever I'm just like back, I'm like, oh, and they're like, you grew up, and I'm like, it's called acclimatization. It happens. Like
Yeah,
it happens fast. After a couple weeks, you acclimatize and you get used to wherever it is
yeah.
you are. So yeah, it's really freaking cold for me now.
And
You know?
you were a Nashvilleian for a short time. I was in Nashville for 18 years, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty. Even though the winter can get gnarly for about 4 days, it's a pretty wet, warm climate. So yeah, the way that Swedes act in the summer, to bring us back to your question, is very. I told you how we're all awkward and quiet, but in the summer, Swedish people feel the need to live all the life they cannot live in the other 9 months. And
Sure.
that, I mean, if any American went there during both seasons, they would meet two different peoples. They would think they were on two different planets. So so Sweden in the summer, you know, I think I think it would be more challenging to control something like the pandemic than the winter because people just stay in and don't talk to each other and just, drink vodka.
Well, that's the other thing. So I wanted to talk to you about this. I mean, some of the things you hear people say, they're like, look, yeah, Sweden took a different approach, but culturally, it was just the idea of something like that being even tried in the United States is just absolutely insane. Because here's the deal. Yeah, they didn't shut down as hard, but a ton of Swedes just naturally chose to stay home. That did happen. Like a lot of people were just being careful. They were staying home. They were, naturally socially distancing. It's like it seems like culturally that's a possibility because in the winter people just stay in anyway, whereas in the US, like, people were flipping out after 2 weeks because they wanted to get a haircut.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of sort of like in the US, I feel like we've seen a lot of sort of like the white privilege thing kick in. Like people complain about not being able to do things like, like there are kids that can't drink clean water in Africa. And like, yeah, you gotta wait. You gotta use a little more hair gel for a few weeks to keep that shit down. Life sucks, right?
Well, there's
Like
people that don't
I
have
have
clean water
I have
here.
no tolerance for it. None.
No, I hear
None.
you, man. I hear you.
I have good friends that are just white privilege training right now, and it's like I'm not into it at all. But yeah, it's to your comment you just made. I feel like in Sweden, uh, the government didn't impose a bunch of rules or quote unquote take your freedom away. They didn't do that, right? But what they did was they issued recommendations, you know,
Hmm.
and
So what were some of those?
well, those were social distancing for sure.
Okay.
And even though gyms didn't close and such, there were recommendations for how to act there, like, don't be an idiot, and you don't have to do this, but you should do this. There was a few rules, of course, like the Swedish entertainment industry shut down completely, like it did over here. Especially all my friends in Sweden that work in the production side of things, or lighting designers or road crew, anything like that, suffering severely because instead of going, you can't get together with more than two people like many countries did or states did for a second. Sweden was like no more than 50 people, and social
Hmm.
distancing has to apply. So with 50 people, not a lot of entertainment can happen uh, and make money, but some could. It's better than nothing. And
Sure.
now they're trying 500.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. They're already that high up there. Wow.
yeah, but
Okay.
that, most concert halls that hold 2,000 people, if you put 500 in there, you really can't. You can only fit 400 if you're going to have the appropriate 6 foot distance. And then it becomes financially not very feasible again. So it's still not worked out. But there are rules in Sweden, like how many people can get together, and there are rules about how restaurants are supposed to operate. But there are more recommendations and rules. And I think what you might be getting at, if I know you correctly, is how the Swedish psyche might be different from the Americans when it comes to following suggestions from your government without feeling like the government is big broing you, so to speak,
Right. Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
and yeah, I do yeah, go ahead.
you warped a little bit on us again there, but I think you're back now. Yeah, it's well, generally
Yeah.
speaking, and again, this is a generalization. There are a lot of left-leaning people in the United States, more so than I think the United States is. Well, definitely more so than it's reflected in the government, and we could go on and on about why that is, but
Mhm.
like I do think that generally speaking, there is a more communal attitude in a place like Sweden than in the United States. That's just a cultural difference, absolutely. Although, of course, mistakes were certainly made in Sweden. What happened in the old folks'
Mhm.
home and stuff like that. But yeah, so you do have that element to it. Um, what would you say, like, as far as, and this might be a very obvious answer, but I still want to just get your assessment of it, like stress wise, what did you notice being in LA versus being in Sweden?
Uh, my personal stress level is like yeah, when you go to a community or to a country, in this case, that had basically no cases and nothing, and there's no masks, and obviously when you see people's faces and there's more emotion around you, even though it's Sweden and the emotion isn't like overtly full on, uh, that was certainly calming to me. A few of my buddies in LA commented that I looked refreshed when I came back. So maybe it was it was good for my stress level. But I think I could definitely feel the stress level a little bit with the Swedes about it. Again, because I have friends in the entertainment industry, which is there, like here, the last thing that's going to go back. So my stress level was down when I was there for sure. Uh, but I definitely saw some of the Swedes. I saw some of their stress levels because I was on vacation and they were in reality, so to speak. You know.
Wow, stress for the people. Like, were people still stressed out over this whole thing, or are they taking it in stride? And then another additional question to that. So, people who have lost their work because of this pandemic, which happened in Sweden and is still happening, did the government take care of them?
Here is a super odd thing, and I get to eat my own words here a little bit after sort of bragging on my home country and our social safety net. At least that were in place when I grew up. All the years I've lived in the US, I've sort of been proud of that. But Sweden has failed miserably during this pandemic with not taking care, that'd be the wrong thing to say, but maybe providing some assistance to the hardest hit citizens, meaning
Interesting.
entertainment industry and independent contractors and small businesses, right? Because here in California, not only, but in the States, period, I've been able to get a few different grants and assistant programs for art workers, musicians. And then so I have been able to tell some of my Swedish friends that me living in America, the place with no social safety net, where it's every man for himself, I've felt that I've had a fair amount of assistance from authorities. And a lot of my friends in Sweden have not. So it's a little bit of a role
Wow.
reversal there, I would say.
Big time. Well, and I guess Sweden
Yes.
has definitely failed there compared to a lot of other European countries. I mean, because a
Yes.
lot of
Yes.
other
I would agree
places,
with
like
that.
they've just, yeah, I mean, because it was like, I mean, I know in England, they're basically just covering people's wages and same, in a lot of other, I
Yep.
mean, nowhere's gotten it perfect, obviously, but compared to the US, I mean, a lot are doing way better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, uh, I think the US, as we know, um, even though it's technically the world's richest country because the amount of assets that exist here, the the common person, the common American, is not very rich. Half of this
Hmm.
country can't. You know, so most of this country is poor.
Right.
Most of the people that work in this country are poor, and so I feel like in Sweden, I don't think people have these huge savings in Sweden, but I think the working class in Sweden that are, fairly poor are maybe not as poor as the working poor here,
Hmm.
which, uh, during the pandemic, I feel like some people that lose their jobs or maybe couldn't work as much, they maybe didn't feel like they couldn't buy groceries the next week because they weren't living on that I can't afford a $400 car repair thing that unfortunately most of America is. So
Interesting.
again, that's my very personal opinion, but I think that might be why Swedes weren't, except the entertainment workers, but why many Swedes weren't completely pissed at the government instantly for not helping out. Uh, Again, total
Well,
freedom.
has there been any assistance at all, or has there been like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
zero? Okay.
there has been some assistance.
Okay.
And again, I speak mostly about the entertainment world because like I seem to be more uh, informed with that. And I know that the government finally put out some help to entertainment workers, and a few of Sweden's most famous and wealthy artists got it. And the news,
Because they
the
need it most.
yeah, the press held them to the fire, like, hey, you got this money too, and they basically gave money back. Swedish artists that are, we're talking the artists, the singer with a record deal, not their band members or crew members, but the actual singers with the record deals also got the government assistance. And there was a lot of press in the press for them to give it back, which a few of them did, possibly to make sure they didn't look bad, but yeah, they were held accountable. Some people that got it and shouldn't have been getting it. So I know that much.
So let's talk about you for a little bit, man. Let's talk about your podcast, the Lowdown Society, and I got the title right, right?
Yes, the Lowdown
Okay.
Society podcast, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it was a little bit riff on like the Dead Poets Society, the old Robin Williams classic.
yeah.
Um, uh, well, quickly, I feel like everyone is starting podcasts to grow their brand and all that stuff now. And sometimes when I post about having a new episode out, some bass player buddies I've known forever will give me shit like, here you are with your podcast again. But
Is it not cool in the music world to have a podcast?
I guess I don't know. I don't know. Here's the deal. When I grew up,
I mean, in the comedy world, you pretty much have to.
I know, but I think it's I don't know. I feel like it's more accepted. When you're a comic, you have to be a little bit like a lead singer. You're the yapper. If you're a bass player, you're supposed to be the quiet guy in the back who just somehow people know about you from your work and so bass players aren't supposed to be these annoying lead singer type personalities.
You're like the
But
unspoken hero. So they're like, Victor, you're giving away our secrets 1 week
yeah,
at a time.
but
You're not
what
supposed to tell everybody.
Yeah, oh, so many secrets too. What happened is I grew up on these, big bass player magazine. And it was on the cover was always these guys that make bass solo records, these world
That's a
famous bass
thing.
solo. Or there was the guy who plays bass in one of the biggest bands that sold the most records. Like if Blink 182 was at the top of the chart, the bass magazine would have a picture of their bass player who might not necessarily be a great player or musician. So
Yeah,
I
yeah. Even I know he's
yeah.
not a fantastic bass player.
So I grew up again wanting to be a freelance musician, and I always wondered who plays bass for Cher, who plays bass for Rod Stewart, who plays bass for Morrissey, who plays bass for all these uh, solo acts. They have the biggest gigs in the world, but nobody knows their name, not even other bass players in many cases. So I found the lack of information in the bass press growing up about actually the most successful freelance guys on earth that just play great songs for a living. No bass solos, no nothing. They just get to play the biggest hits on the charts for a living behind whoever does them. So that's what I've been lucky enough to do a lot in my life. And so the cool thing about having a little bit of success in my field is my phone book is way cooler than I am. In my iPhone, I have numbers to all my idols, basically. And about 8 years ago, I was in a hotel lobby in Atlanta with a gentleman named Hugh McDonald. He played bass on every single Bon Jovi record, whether you're a fan or not. Those are bass lines that are still plaguing radio to this day. And
Sure.
he also played on a bunch of other stuff. So he was one of my biggest heroes growing up. And I was in a hotel lobby in Atlanta having cocktails with him for 3 hours 8 years ago. And our conversation about the industry we're in and about the details of how we approach bass playing and everything, I walked away from that thinking if 15-year-old me could have been a fly on the wall for this conversation, it would have made a bigger impact and I would have gotten more out of it than 100 of these bass magazines. So that's how my
Mm.
podcast started. It started from that experience of I sit and have these bass hangs with bass brothers and sisters for 2-3 hours over coffee or at our houses where we have all our basses and we try each other's stuff out and we nerd out. And I'm like, I have to record this. I can't just have these hangs with cool people in my phone book, in my phone list and not record it. So that's how the podcast started. It's not a big podcast, But you're right, what you said earlier on. When I started it 3 years ago, I found 250 podcasts for guitar players and 3 for bass players. So I'm like, okay, there's a niche here in the market.
There's a niche here.
And
Well,
I've had the bass player for Pink. I've had the bass player for Jimmy Buffett. I've had the bass player for Prince. Most of the bass player for Taylor Swift. Most of the Polestar magazine's 10 most or 15 most profitable tours in the U.S. Most of those gals and guys have been on my podcast. So that's what it is briefly.
well, dude, I don't know if this didn't happen. I'm bummed out it didn't. But did you get to talk to my buddy Roderick at my wedding at all? He was one of my college buddies. He's a big bass guy. I'm so bummed out, you guys. I should have introduced you guys, but it's like, it's your wedding. There's 1,000,005 things going on all the time. But yeah, he's and he's the guy, like, we were talking, and this was years ago when we were both in college, and he was like kind of explaining like the bass and what it really means to be a bass player. And he's like, look, dude, like, he played punk rock, and I know you're not a big punk rock guy, but he played punk rock. And he's like, Ron, if I freaking wanted to, I could like hijack our set and make us sound like a country western band if I wanted to, just by my style of playing. That's the power the bass really has when you're doing it right. And I just never thought, and again, I'd like to think I'm a big music fan. I play some as a hobbyist, and I definitely have always had respect for like I could list my favorite bass players at a young age. Like I knew like Matt Freeman and Rancid. He really showed me like, oh wow, this is what it really means to be a bass player. This is a bass player right here. This freaking guy. And then of course you listen to Primus and you realize what the instruments can do and what it's all about. And so I knew all that, but I didn't know to the extent until he was like breaking that down for me. And I remember that conversation. It was years ago. But so is there like a big rivalry between like 5-string guys and 4-string guys? Are there some like 4-string purists out? Like, is that a thing, or is that totally really? Oh, dude, you got to explain some of this.
Well,
what are you? First of all, what are you?
There's no real rivalry between 4 and 5-string guys. Us freelance guys, we have a bunch of each of them because depending on what either the boss wants on the gig or most of the time what you consider the gig needing, you listen to a record or a track and you're like, oh yeah, a lot of low notes, better bring my 5-string. Or you can bring a 4-string strung with the lowest strings from a 5-string, or there's all kinds of options.
Oh, man. Oh, geez.
The look of a 4-string is the classic look of a bass player. So there are a lot of purists. Like if you're in a band in like Echo Park in LA or East Nashville in Nashville, if you show up with a 5-string in those neighborhoods, that'll be like showing up in bell-bottom jeans to the skinny jeans crowd, That's just not okay.
See, now you got to show up to like a big hipster gig in bell bottoms with a 5-string bass. You got to go full meta with this. You got to do that now.
No, absolutely. And I have done that on purpose quite a few times. Because I really do think it's ridiculous. And the people are like, well, the 5-string, the big extra thing is not cool. I'm like, if you love bass, how can more low notes, extra low notes, not be okay? And I posted a picture yesterday from my podcast for the latest episode, and the guy was playing a 5-string in the picture. And one guy wrote under, he goes, "Oh, it's got 5 strings. It's almost a guitar." I go, that extra string is actually in the other direction. It's lower, so it's actually further away from a guitar. So I have to fight that in the I have to fight the trolls all the time.
So you're very much the peacemaker in this scenario. You're kind of the neutral, but like 4 strings need some love, 5-string needs some love. But very Swedish of you, by the way.
Yeah.
You're the pacifist in this.
It's very rare that I'm a good diplomat. Like I said, I'm pretty much relegated to a life in America because I'm loud and opinionated. But yeah, I got love for both. But when I was in Nashville for 18 years, I played 5-strings almost exclusively. And so that's why when the purist starts going on the 4 only, I have to hop on the unhip nerd crowd and defend the extended range instruments. I know all our favorite records from the good old days were made on 4 strings, and but it's like science and progress is a real thing. And even though a lot of us love old cars and old bikes, and some things were made better back in the day, but innovation is cool, and people with artistic brains can do a lot of things with these other instruments. So
Now, what about the 6 strings? So, does everyone just tell the 6 string people to fuck off? Is that kind of all right?
well,
Now it's just a guitar.
a lot of people do, and I don't play 6 string, but it's such a valid voice.
So is the
I'm
6 string even lower? Does it keep going
no. It's
lower?
got one
Okay.
lower high. It's one lower high string from a 4 string, and one higher string from the 4 string.
So it's
And
almost a guitar.
yeah,
Okay.
and they just look so big. You know what I'm saying? They look like a sort
Yeah,
of
they do look a
football
little
field.
ridiculous.
But there are 7 string basses too. And I'm not out on 6 strings. I don't play one, but my friends that do, I'm all for it. I'm like, whatever it takes for you to get off artistically, I'm for it. It doesn't, just because you have all these extra note, the notion is, oh, because he has all these extra notes means he's going to play a bunch of extra shit and not stay rudimentary and old school. Now, you can be rudimentary and old school on a 6 string bass, much like you could sit at a dinner table with a giant fucking cake and not eat it,
Right. Well, it's like when sometimes you see those drummers where it's like they have the double bass and they have the big setup, and then you're like, that dude's been on the hi-hat and snare for the past 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Why do they need this kit?
Yeah, but then again, respect to that guy, because when he sat down to play, everyone thought he was going to be all like Neil Peart from Rush the whole night. But so you get it. So 6 string basses are that. You can wear one and play one and just leave those extra notes alone for when you need them. But there are 7 string basses, and in that case, I'm like, play the harp.
Just get an organ at this point. What are you doing? This is unnecessary.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I got a story for you, buddy. It's Music Monday, so I got a news story for you. Now this comes from a friend of the show, John from Eve 6. I'm sure you know Eve 6. He is part of the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, and today they just launched a campaign. It's called the Justice at Spotify campaign. Now, what they're demanding, we demand to be paid at least 1 penny per stream. And this is a form that you can sign. This is a petition demanding this. You can go to unionofmusicians.org to sign the Justice at Spotify petition. I'll be signing it later today. I encourage everybody to sign it. You can go to unionofmusicians.org. Now, we've covered this on the show before, but for anyone who might not be familiar with our conversation, Spotify keeps taking more and more from the artists. And it's not just Spotify, it's basically all the streaming services. But that's been going on for a long time. And basically, artists are getting less than pennies for the streams that they get, which have made these platforms what they are. And the CEO of Spotify, not the nicest guy in the world, he told musicians, just make more music. I'm ripping you off, so you better just make more music so I can rip you off more. But, eventually those fractions of pennies will add up.
Yeah, that was the dumbest thing he could have ever said. And
we covered it on the show. Yeah, we had a fun time with that.
Anyone that makes music, even if you make a simple 3-chord pop song, to record that in your home studio and to tweak everything, I mean, making music takes forever. Some of my favorite records where they had unlimited budgets, I know they worked a week. There was 10 people on full salary in a studio for a week to create a 15-second intro. Music that we consume very, very quickly takes 4 friggin' ever to create. So it was very insulting what he said. It's very embarrassing that it's a Swedish company. And yeah, it's just the thing that used to not only make people a living, but make people an incredible living writing songs is just, it's gone. And people consume more songs than ever. So this really is important for other people than musicians. And I'm I've been a live performance guy, so most of my paychecks have never come from royalties, from writing. So so my personal, I don't feel the streaming thing, but my friends that are full-time writers, it's literally like they live in the pandemic that never ends when streaming started taking off, you
Yeah, but
know?
you feel it to an extent because I mean, you and Anthony, you guys do your thing. You put out your music, and you
Yeah.
rely on that digital play, and you're getting some of it, and you're not
Yeah,
getting what you deserve for it. I mean, I'm dealing with.
those $1.50 royalty checks are really amazing.
Well, it should be higher than that. I mean,
Yeah.
like, and I'm feeling it too. Like my comedy, and unfortunately, I was supposed to make another album this year. Now, the thing with the comedy album, you got to do it in front of an audience. You got to do it live for a stand-up comedy album. So my ability to make an actual proper album this year went away with the pandemic. So I wasn't
Mhm.
able. We were going to shoot it in Portland. That all just got pushed back. So I haven't had a stand-up album since 2018. I try to do one every other year.
Mhm.
So, I'm still, the royalty checks have gotten smaller, just because I haven't put a new thing out. So I still have just the same 4 tracks in rotation on Sirius. And, I need some new ones in there, and that ain't happening for a minute. Whereas some people who had some stand up in the vault, they were able to just drop their albums. So stand up albums are still coming out because some of them just take a long time to finish. But for someone like me who, a lot of my material's topical, I kind of got to pump it out when I record it. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, this is what do you think? And this is a heavy question that there is no one answer for, but like, what do you think the fix is kind of going to be? Because the technology is not going away. The world doesn't work that way. So these streaming services, they're going to continue. They're going to, keep growing and stuff like that. But there's got to be a solution where the artist gets a fairer piece of the pie.
Uh, well, the solution is obviously, I mean, duh, for all the streaming services to pay more because they'd make
Sure.
nothing if the songs weren't written, you know?
Right.
And but there has to be, much like there's a Paris Climate Accord where or the biggest leaders of the world meet and just go, well, here's the stuff we have to do together. We can't just do it in a few countries because it won't be good enough, right? That's the kind of worldwide initiative we need. We need many countries at once to do the same thing. Uh, I think, and to basically force anyone operating any type of streaming service in their country to pay the people that make the thing that they're making money from, you know?
Hmm.
So I think basically my answer to your question is it will take a cohesive international planned effort. I don't think legislation in one country, even if it's the US, will do much. You know, I think it'll have to be a lot of countries at once. They'd have to approach it like it's a climate disaster. And for songwriters to get the same attention as a climate maybe is a lot to ask, but unfortunately, it's going to take something like that, I think.
Well, I mean, and again, this is like uh, a very, very, very heavy order. But I mean, also the idea of artists gathering together and saying, we're going to pull our catalogs if you don't treat us better. But how do you
Yeah.
even begin to orchestrate something on that mass level? I mean, it's going to take people at the top,
Yep. Yep.
I
And the
mean,
people
and that's,
and here's the problem. It's a little bit like American politics and lobbying, quite frankly, because a lot of the big record label heads are in cahoots with Spotify. So they're
mhm.
making money, but their artists aren't. So yeah, the labels aren't getting effed like the creators are. And
Oh, yeah. Well,
that's what's gonna make it even harder. Because
Well,
at
they
the
figured out ways to like stay alive in like the most in like just BS. Like now you get these 360 deals where
Yep.
they take a cut of everything you do, but their
Yeah.
job hasn't changed. They
No, their
still do
job
the
hasn't
same
changed,
job
but
they've
yeah.
always done, but they get more of you. Like that's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. You
insanely unfair.
sell t-shirts at a concert and your label gets money from that. So that's it's very, the 360 deals are, it's pretty heinous, and that was all a result of sales going away,
Right.
because in the heyday of the CD, and we're talking late 1999, early 2000, when say some of the pop records at the time, a lot of them, most of them made in Sweden by the same guy, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys. Those albums would do almost like 1.5 million units the first week. And you're setting several people up for life from 1 week of people buying CDs. Meaning, if
Mm-hmm.
you are willing to live a middle class life, you can retire from 1 or 2 weeks of sales, And it's incredible that has ever existed, And there are no sales anymore. There really aren't, and it was interesting to see in the early 2000s when people like Sting and people like that would just, they couldn't break a song and they would put it in a Jaguar commercial, and then Jaguar would break it for them in addition to paying them a bunch of money, and it was just weird, because I'm old enough to have grown up when some artists that were, at the top of their game, even if a record wasn't a hit, they wouldn't sink to certain levels. But then in this day and age, it's not sinking to certain levels or selling out at all. It's the only option you have if you want to reach lots of people with your art.
Oh yeah,
Is you
song
have to
placement
make,
is just, I mean,
yeah,
dude, Iggy's done it, man. I mean, now it's like that's
yeah,
just something that you do when you can.
yep, absolutely.
Oh man. Well, so let me plug this one more time for everybody at home. I encourage you to go and sign this. I'll be signing it later today. Victor, will you be signing?
I will be signing. I really
Awesome.
appreciate you bringing this to my attention.
No problem, buddy. Unionofmusicians.org. Sign the Justice at Spotify petition. Again, that's unionofmusicians.org. And shout out to John from Eve 6 for helping to orchestrate all this. Victor, where can everybody find your stuff?
Well, not my stuff, but the podcast is the Lowdown Society podcast, and it exists in every single dark corner of the internet where podcasts exist. I have gotten every single provider and host that I know of to carry it, so that's easy to find. I'm on Instagram, just my name, Victor Broden. Pretty easy spelling for a friggin' foreigner. And it's mostly bass related stuff on there, but I also do photography. I have Victor Broden Photography, and that's everything from like dark tortured portraits of musicians to really Playboy style glamour stuff. So, I do the podcast and the photography, and I do the bass playing. So I annoy people in several ways because I can't stick to one.
What about Love Electric? Where can people find that?
The Love Electric.
I'm telling Anthony later. We'll be like, hey, man, Victor didn't plug the music, just so you know.
Well,
you got to get your partner in shape.
Well, here's the thing. Anthony has out some solo stuff right now, and I don't want to take any attention away from that.
All right.
His solo stuff just dropped. So I want people to only go to that for now. That's why.
All right.
Anti songs.
All right. Anti songs.
With an I. That's my partner in crime. Super great funky pop music. But me and him are duo the Love Electric. We physically are planning to be in the same place, even though we can co-write online. We're going to actually try to get together here later this fall and write the Love Electric. But yes, that's my pop funk electronic duo, the Love Electric. Every C is a K, so it's easy to find. Check that out as well.
All right, man. Let me go to a couple super chats here. IB4D, thank you very much for the super chat contribution. Much appreciated. Dan, what's up, buddy? I hope you're well. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Dan says, make music, not war. I am with you, Dan. Well put. Victor, I'm going to need your help on this one. This is from Rabul Rodmule. Thank you very much, Rabul. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it very much. Hedge Sevs. All right, so Victor, help me out. HEJ, and then the second word SVEJS. Can you walk me?
Hey, that's Hey Sveis, and it's a very old school, chipper Swedish way of saying howdy.
Okay, Hey Sveis. So let me try to get.
So he
Hey
just said
Sveis.
that's it.
Howdy.
Yes.
Howdy. Thank you very much. Ron and Victor, keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Rabul. Thank you very, very much for that. So thank you, IB4D. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Rabul, for your super chat contributions. You keep this show on the air. Check out Victor's stuff. Check out the Lowdown Society podcast and the Love Electric. And don't forget to sign that petition over at unionofmusicians.org, the Justice at Spotify petition. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. We're going to be having some grassroots candidates in the California area on both tomorrow and Wednesday, and then some throughout the week, because the election's coming up and there's some down ballot stuff, and we're going to be shining a light on that. But, first we had to have a nice Music Monday. Victor, thanks for doing this, buddy. It was cool catching up with you.
This was super fun, and I'm going to hang out and watch some of these grassroots candidates because that is my shit.
Awesome, dude. Well, we'll be back tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And in the meantime, y'all know the drill. Lucy says meow. She's asleep on the couch, actually. But she says meow. And I say peace. Peace.